It's a delicate process, but Council are wasting no time in kickstarting the redevelopment of the Museum of the Riverina. The multi-million-dollar project will enhance the showcase of the region's history.
One of the staff jokingly called it the house moved from hell, and that was a good expression to use when you're trying to explain to non-museum people just how tricky and detailed it is packing up a museum collection.
We're sitting in such a strange place at the moment because so much has happened and nothing has happened as well.
Because it's not like when you're moving house you can just shove everything into a box and move it from A to B. So it has been quite challenging, and it's lucky I've moved 5 times since I moved to Wagga, so I'm quite good at moving stuff, but
So the redevelopment started when the staff were finally coming to terms with the crisis in our storage capacity. We were bursting at the seams.
And so we wrote some grant applications for the Entwine project, which had been sitting with the museum for a long time, and also for an upgrade to the building. And in early 2018, we found out we were successful with our application to the Regional Cultural Fund.
But it was primarily about improving storage and workspaces so we could better care for the collection. But since then, it's evolved into a new exhibition space as well. We've packed up 25,000 objects, which was, as you can imagine, a logistical challenge.
the items include from things like a cotton reel or a button or a tiny little badge, right through to large pieces of agricultural machinery, so ploughs, Bennett wagons, which were probably the largest pieces that were moved, tractors.
Relocated to a number of off-site locations. We're now going through de-accessioning objects so that we make sure that what we bring back to the new site is only what we want and fits our collection policy. And yeah, there have been days where it's been a bit stressful, like from hard physical work to methodical, monotonous recording and registering of things on the Mosaic software database, but having to make sure we got that right. So that's one side, but the other side is that most staff agree that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for people working in museums to actually pack up a collection, build and curate a new museum and bring a collection back again.
So we had to make decisions as to what went where. So the most important objects were the ones stored in storeroom 1, which was on the old site, was our permanent storage where they were fragile. So they were a lot of organic materials, they were our textiles, a lot of which are from the 19th century, all of our photos and really special items, so small items that may need to be protected from theft. So all of those basically went to Charles Sturt University Archives because it's manned by professionals, and the climate there is stable. We have the house at Riverina Riv Water, which is where we have large objects again that are significant, but didn't need the care and didn't need the climate control that we have at the previous site. So it's a brick building, so it stays quite stable there. But again, they're items that are like wooden things that were made to be used outside, like tools and farm implements and stuff like that. And so we have containers at Riv Cranes, the council depot, and those containers are refrigerated containers. So again, they're quite ideal for, they're quite good climate-wise for the items, but we had to choose what went in there quite carefully. And the CSU winery. Things there that went there were really, we had a lot of hardware go there, but also some of our really big objects, again, that aren't going to be to any detriment to them to be in that sort of storage, because it's essentially like a large hangar. It's quite an expanse of different storage locations.
We had to quickly come up with a plan of how we were going to track these objects. That was probably the main thing that we had to do. We had to know where everything was at all times. So we worked out a system of tagging everything. Every object got a number. And then once it was in the system, we knew it was safe and it wasn't going to be lost. So that was probably the main thing, not losing things.
There's all the ute loaded up, all the crew ready to go, and guess what?
I found that COVID really hard because I went home. I could go home and work from home, so I did. Because the team is fairly tight and we've been working in, remote locations for a very long time. It was about adapting what we were already doing and making that kind of fit to what we have. So we would have Zooms or once things started opening up again, meeting in open spaces so we could see each other, or in cafes and those types of things, so that we could talk through and look at physical things and keep those exhibitions progressing.
Well, at the start, especially COVID times when we had to work from home and we were trying to work out, everyone was just trying to work out how they could exist and continue working in those times. And it was good for the first little while we were doing research on our exhibitions for content. But then we just quickly discovered that we needed to work closely with our objects and the systems that we have installed on our computers, because we've got hundreds and thousands of files and documents that we needed access to, and you couldn't get that at home.
The hardest thing was probably not being able to look at the objects and only looking at photos of them whilst working up that text.
So, for example, curators would go through the museum database and finding objects that would match with their exhibition, and then they'd ask us to locate the objects, bringing the objects to HCC, which was the museum in the city, and photograph the objects and measure the objects for the exhibition designer. And because it was during COVID time, obviously the exhibition designer couldn't come to Wagga, she was living in Melbourne. So we would email her all those images so she could see if they will actually fit in the cabinet displays that they had already purchased. So we had to go through all these locations that we had stored those objects, find those objects, pull them out, measure them, photograph them, and send them to the curators and to the exhibition designer.
Having to pack up and close one museum site and relocate everybody down to the Historic Council chambers was a bit tricky. That was another COVID impact. We had to get a roster going for workstations so that we didn't have too many staff in on the one day. And so there was a bit of a balancing act there. We've lost some significant exhibition space at the Historic Council chambers because the chambers meeting room and the Morrow room are both full of workstations and object storage and shelving. So that's had a big impact on our scheduling for museum programs and exhibitions. We've had to cancel one or two. because of the delays in building the new museum. And because we have a lot of objects in off-site storage with the university and Riverina Water and other people who have kindly been letting us store objects there, those delays are putting pressure on those off-site storage centre areas.
Yeah, there's sort of lots of delays along the way with COVID and getting things finalised, and everything always takes longer than you think it will as well. But now that everything is, it's all approved and underway, it's moving so fast.
Turn that side.
Well, the Cook's Galley is one of our most significant objects, and it's our only object in the collection that's on the State Heritage Register. However, it looked a little bit kind of, I guess, lost and not as well cared for as it should have been being outside, and we always had plans to bring it inside, but I mean that was gargantuan. It was kind of bigger than Ben-Hur to bring this item inside, and in the old building we couldn't because it just simply wouldn't fit in.
Yeah, the Cook's Galley has been on display outdoors in an open shed for at least 25 years or more. And before that it was just sitting on a farm. So it's accumulated, probably 30 plus years of grime and dust and other problems that have basically contributed to its degradation as it's been on display here and prior. And we've been here cleaning and stabilising most of the issues and problems. We started out doing a full assessment of this, making recommendations for what treatments it needed, and now, probably about 5 or 6 years later, we are doing the treatment work.
Yeah, so now that it's inside, I think it's been given the space it deserves. So, I mean, really it's the centrepiece of that gallery, but it's also original. It's still in its original condition, and that's why it's so important, because everything else in the chaff cutting plant has since deteriorated or has been given away, but the heart still remains. So it's nice that it's sort of become the heart of the museum as well.
It was a 4-day setup in the end, including the media day on the 4th day. So Sam and I went to Sydney with Auntie Cheryl Penrith, and we had a welcome to country and a smoking ceremony at the Australian Museum. And then we came back as a group with a conservator and a curator from the Australian Museum, stopped in Jugyong and brought the objects out to have a bit of a breathe. And then we brought them into the museum, and the following day we had a community event where community members came into the museum. We had a welcome to country and a smoking ceremony for the objects. And it was a really special event, partly because of the way the Australian Museum is allowing the objects to be cared for, which gives that decision-making power to the elders. So community members were actually able to hold the objects, and that was, I think, a really emotional thing for a lot of people. And yeah, now they're in there sort of in pride of place, and we have lots of people come through, and it's, I think, quite meaningful for community members, both Wiradjuri and non-Wiradjuri, to see those things back on country after they'd sort of sat in a dark storage room for the better part of 50 years.
The finest collection of Wiradjuri and First Nations artefacts, military honours, sporting and cultural history, all combined under one roof at the newly transformed Museum of the Riverina.
There are 25,000 pieces of history in this museum.
Countless names working countless hours over the past 5 years to upgrade the Botanical Gardens site into the state-of-the-art facility it is today.
It's fantastic to see for the arts and cultural side of the city that something as substantial as this. This institution tells the stories of the Riverina. You know, I grew up in the Riverina. I know how important this area is, not just to New South Wales, but to the nation. A centre for people to gather, to meet, to enjoy. And it's done that regardless of people's geographic circumstances, their physical circumstances, their economic circumstances.
Really intense, really long days. As the staff member who didn't have kids or a partner at the time living here, I was the one who'd come in early to let the trades in because they were still working while we were installing, and I would be the one who stayed right until the end of the day. And we were working, doing 5-6 day weeks, and the work was so precise. The mantra was millimetres matter.
So we began to move things back once the new exhibition building was open, and we were able to get back into our repurposed old museum building, which is now the collection space. And it has been, I don't know that big really covers it. Yeah, so it's a huge effort because we have, well, as you know, so many things across a number of different sites and a small team moving everything back onto site. So it's a slow process because we have worked out where we had to work out where we're going to put things. So we have the large object store, we have new compactus units. We're going to reimagine our collections now into object types rather than not necessarily keeping collections together, but bringing things in so we'll have all our paper-based stuff together, all of our art stuff, all of our art pieces together, our framed pieces together, our textiles. So things will be easier to find, but it's just a very slow and tedious procedure, bringing everything back and then making sure it goes into the right spots where people can find them.
Like, we moved everything from Ethel Grinter's silk stockings to sacred texts from the Masonic halls in Wagga, through to the Moline plough tractor, which is a massive and dangerous piece of equipment. So it's been fascinating, difficult, lots of hard work, but yeah, enjoyable. So it's a logistical enterprise, that's for sure.
Some of the storage places were finite, so we had to be out at the end of a lease, so that kind of dictated what we brought back and when, but it was also the significance of the collections. So we definitely had a priority list of which collections were our most significant. That those, of course, are the ones that get priority treatment because we want to make sure they're safe and secure and in the best spot for them. So it's slow. We still have some collections off-site which we know are in safe and secure places, but there's actually no end to a lease. We are, of course, it'll come round in the next year or 18 months, but it's still the house move from hell.
What we've been through in the last 4 years, COVID, wet weather, problems with building, coming back, finally opening, then the roadwork started, so another challenge. I'm amazed that we made it through without anyone having a breakdown or killing somebody. Is that too much?
I thought when we finished it would be really hard to let go and to move on, but it actually wasn't. It was actually really easy to, when we did finally get to that opening and bringing it into the public and all of those types of things, it was actually a really amazing thing, but also very glad to put it behind us and to move on to new things.
You know, we still had so many other wheels turning while this was all happening, so it's very satisfying that we've got to this point and all those things are working.
So one of the most special things from my point of view about working on this project, from starting with a blank page to taking it through where we actually have this amazing big building and all these new spaces, is the way that my colleagues and other community groups and school groups coming in have been able to take ownership of those spaces and use them in their own ways for running programs or engaging with school students or community, and that is sort of really special. That is like the next phase. We always said the whole way through that the opening wasn't the end, it was the beginning, and it is really nice to see that that seems to be happening now.